Tonight's show is special and it is timely. The current war in Israel has all the signs of Psalm 83. Could this be the Psalm 83 war that's mentioned in the Bible? And where does it fit in the prophetic calendar? We want to look at some history tonight as well. One of world history's most decisive battles. This battle saved Europe and Christianity from becoming Muslim, and all came down to a mayor of a small town. All right, get ready. All right, Psalm 83. Psalm 83 is an unusual psalm. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read it to you because let me just basically tell you what it says. Psalm 83 is a coming war with the Arab countries around Israel. It will end the Arab-Israeli conflict. I ran into this about 3 years ago. And as I was looking and studying that, I went back on YouTube and went back in this old video was, I guess it was taken from TV, probably the late 1970s, early 80s. It was the great prophetic minister, Hal Lindsey. He wrote The Late Great Planet Earth. And here he is speaking of the war of Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17, which is connected to that. And I listened to this and I said, all these years, I've never seen this in the Bible. And then when I realized that he had saw this years ago, I began to really get into a deep dive. When the war in Israel broke out last week, I went back and looked at the scriptures. And it is very possible that what we're seeing is a prophetic look at the Bible and is happening now in Israel there, what we would call Psalm 83. And so let me read this to you. Because what's different about this war, and Israel's had many wars, but this war ends the Arab-Israeli conflict. So let me read these verses to you right now. So just kind of hold on here. Psalm 83, verse 1. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace. Do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, trouble, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. And we could say that Hamas definitely hates the true God. They've taken crafty counsel against your people. They've consulted together against your sheltered ones. They've said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. Basically, we want to rewrite history. We want to wipe Israel off every history book. Verse 5. They consulted together with one consent to form a confederacy against you. Now here it is, watch. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Jebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also has joined them. They've helped the children of Lot, Selah. All of those countries that we mention here are the ancient geographical areas that when Asaph was writing this prophetic word. Now, later on, we're going to look at these areas today. But I'm going to tell you right now, just give you a hint. Every one of these areas mentioned all surround the nation of Israel. Verse 9. Deal with them as with Midian, and as with Sisera, as with Jabin at the brook of Kishon, who perished at Endor, who became as refuse on the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and like Zeb, yes, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, let us take for ourselves the pastures of God for our possession. Now, this part of Psalm 83 is a look back at Judges. And so it's not only a prophetic word, it's a prayer. And Asaph is saying, Lord, make them like the Midianites and the Canaanites in the book of Judges. We'll get to that too later as well, because that's very significant. Verse 13. Oh my God, make them like the whirling dust, like the chaff before the wind, as the fire burns the woods and as the flame sets the mountains on fire. So pursue them with your tempest, frighten them with your storm, and I'll fill their faces with shame, that they may seek your name, O Lord. Let them be confounded and dismayed forever. Let them be put to shame and perish, that they may know that you, whose name alone is the Lord, are the most high over all the earth. Now, I'll get to this later, but you know what he's saying? He said God created a firestorm and destroyed them. It's very significant. Psalm 83 coming war with Arab surrounding Israel. It will end the Israeli Arab conflict. It will bring some peace and will fulfill Ezekiel 38's prophecy. Now, what's Ezekiel 38 prophecy? Verse 11 says this, that the enemies will come into a land of walled villages. So here we are. I want you to watch this. Psalm 83 war. And then right after that, the next war is the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. All right? That's not Armageddon. The third major battle is the Battle of Armageddon. What is the difference? In Psalm 83, you can look at it at an inner ring. These nations, actually, Arab nations, watch, Arab nations that actually surround Israel. But the Ezekiel 38 war, I mean, you probably have to have a message on that, is when Russia and Iran and Turkey and North Africa countries, they come down and come back underneath and come down from the north, the main body come from the north against Israel. Israel cannot defeat them. And the Bible says that God intervenes and God causes an earthquake, causes some kind of destruction. It almost sounds like a nuclear bomb, causes confusion and destroys these armies. These are not the same armies that are mentioned in Psalm 83. Somehow, at the end of Psalm 83, Israel actually has peace. And this war that's been going on for 1,000 years between the Arabs and the Israelis, it finally comes to an end. And I believe it will pave the way for Ezekiel 38, that war, and also pave the way for the Antichrist. Watch. There will be a peace treaty at the beginning of the tribulation period with Antichrist. Is there a connection? The Temple Mount, Israel is going to rebuild the temple. We know that. And is it possible that the Temple Mount would become Israel's and they can prophetically build that new temple during the tribulation period? They can't do it now because of the Arabs. But if the Arabs are destroyed or they're crippled or degraded, then it could actually happen. Now, during the war, this passage says that God will strengthen the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and they will be able to defeat the Arabs around them. Now, who in the world is Asaph? Asaph wrote this 3,000 years ago. He was a prophet, 1 Chronicles 29:30, 2 Chronicles 29:30, 1 Chronicles 25:2 say that he was a prophet. So this is a prophecy. He was David's musical director, and he wrote 12 psalms as well. And this is an amazing prophetic picture that he's going here, because in this particular passage, he's telling us that there's going to come a time when God will not only defeat the Arabs, but they will never bother Israel again. Let's look at history. David defeated these guys, but they came back. 1948, these same Arab countries went against Israel and Israel became a nation. They came back. 1967, they came back, right? 1973, they came back. But these Arab countries, all right, now completely leave Israel alone. Psalm 83 says they will be destroyed, they'll be crippled, they will be downgraded to the point that they never come against Israel again. This is significant. I'm telling you, and I can't be dogmatic about it, but I'm telling you, watch this war, because this war is now breaking out on 3 fronts. The South, we know, Hezbollah is beginning a lot of missiles and coming down, and they're itching. They're just testing. Now, we also know in the West Bank, which really should be called the East Bank, the West Bank where Jordan runs, we also know they're shooting missiles that way, so there's a possibility for a third front right there. Hamas is in the south, Hezbollah in the north, Syria in the northwest, and they're making noise. Jordan is supporting Hamas. Saudi Arabia has pledged support for Hamas. Egypt has neutral so far. All of this is being supplied by Iran. They've trained them, they give them everything they need, and guess where they got the money from? The United States of America. We've given them so much money. We gave $341 million to the Palestinian authorities last year. We have given Iran, we've released $6 billion to Iran, right? But not only that, when Trump was president, he had an oil embargo where Iran could not sell oil to China. Well, guess what? Old Joe Biden, senile Biden, came in. He got rid of the embargo, and they have made $80 billion by selling their oil now. We have supplied Hamas terrorists. We have sold them our country down the river. Now, want to hear something else that's very interesting? We've given 200 million or more, I think more, dollars to Ukraine. They have now found weapons that the Hamas terrorists had with the Ukrainian with markings on it that from us. So which means this, and this is now a fact, that someone in Ukraine sold our weapons to the terrorists. They'll make a little extra money. We're also finding weapons that the Taliban sold them weapons to that we left in Afghanistan when we left them with that terrible, terrible disaster. Yeah, it does look pretty bad. What really makes me angry is that we have been part of this. Now, there's people are saying, well, Psalm 83 and Ezekiel. Everybody knows about the Ezekiel 38-39 war, okay? All right, this big war, God intervenes. But the question is this, are they different? Let me show you real quick. Just take a minute. There's a difference, and here's the big picture between the war that will happen with the Arabs and the war that will happen with Russia and Iran and Turkey and all the other countries. In the Psalm 83 war, it's Arab versus Jews. In the Ezekiel 38 war, non-Arabs versus Jews, because Iran is not really considered an Arab country. They're Persians. They're different. In the Psalm 83, we have an inner circle. They're neighbors. In the Psalm Ezekiel 38, we have the outer circle. They're the non-neighbors. They come from other areas. Arabs versus the Jews, Psalm 83. They come to take possession of the promised land. But the other motive for the non-Arabs and the Jews is to take plunder, to rob Israel. Not only destroy them, but to rob them. There's different motives. There's also different defeats. The IDF defeats him in Psalm 83. God has to supernaturally intervene because this army is so massive and so big. God supernaturally intervenes to show his power. There are also different results. In the Psalm 83, it ends the ancient hatred between Arabs and Jews. But in the Ezekiel 38, the result is it upholds the name of God. It basically begins to tell and warn the people. Now, I showed you this list of countries. Give me just a minute. I want to go through this list of countries because what we're reading in the Bible is the ancient geographical areas. But the question is this: who are they today? Watch. Hang on to your seats. The first one he mentions is the tent of Edom. Now, when tents are mentioned in the Bible, it usually means two things: either military encampments or refugees settlements. They are Edomites. That today is Palestinians and southern Jordan. So we're always speaking about refugees, Palestinian refugees, and southern Jordan. Those are the tents of Edom. The second thing is he mentioned is Ishmaelites. Ishmael is the father of the Arabs. This is the Saudis. Here's Moab, he mentions in Psalm 83. These are Palestinians and central Jordan. And by the way, most Palestinians are Jordanian, if you didn't know that. The Hagrites, or the Hagarenes. This is the Saudis and Egyptians today. Hagar, if you remember her, she had the Abraham had a relationship with her in illegal. She was the bondwoman, the slave woman. She is the matriarch of Egypt. And these are the Hagrites. Jabal is Hezbollah, because Jabal speaks of northern Lebanon. Ammon, our Palestinians, speaks of northern Jordan. Amalek, our Arabs in the Sinai region. Philistia is the Gaza Strip. Again, blatantly, that is Hamas. Tyre, or Tyre, is Hezbollah in southern Jordan. Assyria are the Syrians, and back in those days, it meant Assyria and northern Iraq and parts of Turkey. But look at this. He says the children of Lot. He mentions here the children of Lot. They've helped the children of Lot. You remember the children of Lot, who they were? Lot had kids by his two daughters. I think he got drunk. He had kids by his two daughters. It's an incestual relationship. condemned by God. Remember his two kids? One was called Moab, one was called Ammon. These two guys have been a thorn in the side of Israel for 1,000+ years. Wow. Usually the first mention in a conspiracy in the Bible is usually the star of the show, and the first mention are the tents of Edom. This is Hamas. Hamas would be the lead country, and they would be the lead country to go in to Israel. And we already see the Hamas led this attack. Now, something I want to mention to you. In verse 9 and 10, he says, deal with them like Midian, like Sisera, and like the Canaanites and all of that. That's a reference to Judges. Judges chapter 4 through Judges chapter 8. I don't have time to go through it. You can go back and read all those chapters. The Canaanites for 20 years waged war and incursions against Israel. God raised up Deborah and Barak, and they led them to defeat these armies. They killed King Jabin, is mentioned here, King Sisera, and they never again bothered Israel. They wiped them out. Now, there's another reference to the Midianites. You remember the famous chapter about Gideon. The Midianites for 7 years waged war and incursions against Israel. Gideon took only 300 committed men. Go back and read that story. And he killed the princes. They were Oreb and Zeb, mentioned here. And he also killed the other kings, mentioned there later. And watch this. Midian was so decimated, they never bothered Israel again. So what is he saying here? He's saying, God, wipe these Arab nations out like you did in the book of Judges. Make all the nations suffer the same fate. Cripple them forever. That's exactly what God is saying. And this is a prediction. I'm telling you, folks, you got to wake up. You've got to listen and watch what's going on. Now, I want to share something with you at the end. I look at this in the Hebrew language. In the last part of that, verse 13 through 8, he says, let the fire burn in a forest. Flames set the mountains ablaze. One country in this area, one country in this area. He's saying here, create a firestorm. There's one country in this area that has nukes. It's not Iran. It is Israel. Israel has between 200 and 400 nukes. They don't never tell you exactly what they have, but somewhere between 200 and 400 nukes right now. Part of this prophecy is Isaiah 17:1. It says that Damascus would be gone. It would disappear forever. It would be a heap of ruins. The entire city would be burned to the ground. If you go back to Isaiah 17:2 through 11, Israel would hurt. They would suffer pain. But eventually Damascus would be completely destroyed. Now, if you go to Jeremiah 49:2, Amman, the capital of Jordan, would also be destroyed and be a heap of ruins. Israel would also take back the land, all that land that Jordan belongs to Israel. Israel still has not got all the promised land that God gave to them, but they will. And it's very possible by the end of this war, they're going to have all their land back. But we'll wait and see. I guess my point today is this: Jesus is coming soon, and are you ready? My friends, keep your eyes up, keep your eyes on the Bible, keep your eyes to God. There's something significant about this war that's going on, and pray for the peace of Israel. I want to share something with you, a little bit of history. I love history. I'm kind of I would say, a little minor historian. But in 732, Christianity was saved. Civilization was saved from Islam. And 80,000 Muslim warriors were defeated by Charles Martel and the Franks. Now, the Franks are the French. Now, this happened all the way back in 732 AD. And really, we just passed it just a little while ago. October the 10th, 732 was the actual day of the battle. And I would say the most decisive battle that saved Europe from becoming Islamic. 100 years after the death of Islam's prophet, that's Prophet Muhammad, that was in 632. A century which had seen the conquest of thousands of square miles of lands that were formerly Christian. Syria was Christian. Egypt was Christian. North Africa and Spain. Islam began to just run through the world. and just taking over. And you know what Islam means, don't you? It means submission, and began to just take over. And they came to the heart of Europe, and they faced the continent's chief military power, and it was one, and it was the Franks. Now, what's really crazy about this story, there was a mayor. His name was Charles Martel. Now, at this time in this part of in this France region, they were all split up in little different groups and all. And so here's the mayor of a small town, and he was a duke and a prince probably, and he was a politician. Later became a military leader, and he was kind of what we would call the de facto leader of France, the de facto leader of the French, Charles Martel. Muslim hordes began to, they just numbered 80,000, ravaged southwestern France. They slaughtered and enslaved countless victims. And by the way, just like the Muslims and Hamas is doing today, they slaughtered those people in Israel, 1,300 plus. All right? Listen, nothing has changed with the radical Islamics. Nothing has changed with these savages. And Hamas is demonstrating that today. Now, they met and clashed with 30,000 Frankish infantrymen under the leadership of Charles Martel. It was October 10th, 732. Now, we don't know exactly where. There's a couple of towns, I think one's called Poitiers and one Tours, and somewhere between there, you can go back and look at this on a map. This is where this battle took place. But I want to read you some stuff. Here was an anonymous medieval Arab chronicler describes the battle as follows. Listen to this. Near the river Owar, the two great hosts of two languages, Arabic and Latin, and the two creeds, Islam and Christianity, were set in array against each other. The heart of Abd al-Rahman, his captains, and his men were filled with wrath and pride, and they were the first to begin the fight. The Muslim horsemen dashed fierce and frequent forward against the battalions of the Franks, who resisted manfully. Many fell dead on either side until the sun going down. Now, another chronicler picked it up. Entirely consisting of wild, headlong charges, the Muslims attacked and their attack proved ineffective. For the men of the north, quoting from this other historian, the men of the north stood as motionless as a wall. They were like a belt of ice frozen together, not to be dissolved. I guess they created what's called a shield wall. They slew the Arabs with the sword. The eastern Franks, vast of limb and iron of hand, hewed on bravely in the thick of the fight. One writer chronicled, the Franks refused to break ranks and allow successive horsemen to gallop through the gaps, which Arab cavalry tactics relied on. All right? Instead, they tightened their ranks, watch, drawn up in a band around their chief, that is Charles. The people, he writes, of the Franks carried all before them. Their tireless hands drove their swords down to the breast of the foe. What is he saying here? They formed this shield wall. It was a wall of ice, and the Arabs were used to taking their horses and running through them, and they couldn't break it. They couldn't get through them. Let's go a little farther with these different historians. At one point, Allah's warriors surrounded and trapped Charles, but he fought as fiercely, as hungry as the wolf falls upon the stag. By the grace of our Lord, he wrought a great slaughter upon the enemies of the Christian faith, writes Dennis the chronicler. Then was the first called Martel, for as a hammer of iron. By the way, his nickname was the Hammer. Martel, for as a hammer of iron, of steel, and of every metal, even so he dashed and smote in a battle all of his enemies. Now watch this. The battle was going on, and then it came to night. At night, descended on the field of carnage. The two bloodied armies disengaged, withdrew to their camps. At the crack of dawn, the Franks prepared to resume battle, only to discover that the Muslims had all fled under the cover of darkness. Their master Abdul had been killed in fighting the day before, and the Berbers, these were Muslims from Spain, the Berbers, freed of his whip, having tasted Frankish metal, apparently preferred life and some plunder over martyrdom. They all fled back south, still looting and burning, enslaving all and sundry as they went, aware that the strength lay, listen to this, that his strength lay in the wall of ice. Charles did not give chase. Now, let me tell you what happened. This is the aftermath of the battle. All cavalry battles, a gory mess strewn with thousands of wounded or dying horses, abandoned plunder, and dead and wounded Arabs. Few of the wounded were taken prisoner, given their previous record of murder and pillage. And let me just stop right here. Doesn't that sound like Benjamin Netanyahu? He said, we're not going to leave one Hamas terrorist alive. They took the life of our people. We will take their life. I guess it happened in 732 as well. Watch. I went back and did some research. The oldest sources give an astronomical number of slain Muslims. They're saying many thousand. Nobody can find a real exact number of how many were slain, but they just say many thousands of Muslims were slain, and only a small fraction of slain Franks. Whatever the true number is, significantly fewer numbers of Franks we know than Muslims fell in that day. The Arab chroniclers refer to the engagement as the pavement of martyrs, suggesting that the earth was littered with Muslim corpses. Now, the Christians were excited. They could not believe it. And I want you to think about this, folks, that in this modern era of time, they celebrated. We celebrate today. And the end result of all of this is simply they saved Europe. They saved Christianity. This is the reason. Watch. Here's a Kurt, the historian, writes this. He says, we still saw at Tours as one of the great events in the history of the world, as upon its issue depended whether Christian civilization could continue or Islam prevail throughout Europe. So here's what happened. When they defeated, Western Europe never again was attacked by the Muslims. They were always kept safe. Now, I will say this. They still poked around Eastern Europe and poked around the Mediterranean, and Muslims were hard to deal with, and they were always trying to pick and take plunder and kill and massacre people. The whole idea of Islam is to make the whole world Islamic. But we know, can you imagine what would have happened if the Muslims had won and took over all of Western Europe? The only person that was really mad about it was Hitler. Yeah, Hitler talked about this. Here it is. Hitler was really upset about this particular battle. Let me read you what he said. Had Charles Martel not been victorious at Poitiers, already you see the world had fallen into the hands of the Jews, so gutless a thing was Christianity. Then we should, in all probability, have been converted to the Mohammedisms, that cult which glorifies heroism, which opens the seventh heaven to the bold warrior alone. Then the Germanic races would have conquered the world. Christianity alone prevented them from doing so. He was so upset that he said Christians stopped the Islam from taking over the world and basically stopped the Germanic races from conquering the world as well. He went on to call the Christians as meek and flabby, and he all kinds of junk was saying. Isn't that funny? You could always tell a person by their enemies. Well, Charles Martel, we thank you very much. In 732, you defeated them. And I think what's really sad today, let me bring it up to the today before I close. What's going on today in France? What's going on today in Europe? Did you watch TV and see 100,000 maybe plus in France and in London, Palestinian supporters just marching in the street, death to Israel, death to America, kill the babies, all of that stuff? See, here's the plan. For years now, they have been slowly immigrating to France and to Great Britain. We know there's a number of mayors that are now Muslim. The mayor of London is Muslim. We also know in France, one of the great Islamic leaders said years ago, he said, our goal is to take over France. How are they going to take over France? You know what they're doing, don't you? They're not going to go in there and attack them. Like the Muslims are not going to come across the coast there and attack them. But very slowly, they're taking over one thing after another after another. There's so many terrorist cells. They're going to overwhelm France. They're going to overwhelm Great Britain. I hope that those two nations, those two countries wake up, because that's really the plan. They're going because where they are and what they're doing, having more kids, more people coming in, very slowly, it's going to be a takeover, a complete takeover in years from now. And who knows, 10 years, 20, I don't know. But I think that France and Great Britain and Western Europe better be careful, because they have a whole new technique now. Rather than fight, they're just going to absorb you into Islam. All right. Hey, listen, thank you so much for watching tonight. Please like, please subscribe, leave a comment, and if you will, just share it with someone. All right. Share it with somebody in your group. All right. Good night and God bless.